name is James Walker. I'm a Christian apologist, but even though I'm a Christian, I still learn from Atheist Edge.
It goes on to explain, like for us too, we are also born under the law because we are also born to the woman Hagar. He means allegorically Hagar as the world order. It doesn't mean we were literally born out of the womb of the woman named Hagar. So in the context of the argument, he's talking about Jesus being allegorically born into the world order and therefore subject to it, which is how he was able to kill it with his own death. And then of course, if Paul had continued the argument, if he'd had to, he would say that Jesus then became the son of Sarah, just the same way we will be when we get to live eternal life, or actually when we join the citizens of God, or basically join the city of God. So you can look at it, and it's ambiguous as to which does he mean an actual literal birth, or does he mean an allegorical birth? You can't tell from that passage. It's very odd. He doesn't name the woman, and there's no other reason for him to mention being born of a woman in this passage, other than this particular allegorical argument he's making. So it's what I call weak tea. It's weirdly ambiguous, rather than saying, and when Mary gave birth to Jesus, or as we know, from the census records that Jesus was born to a descendant of David, or like something like that would be much more concrete. No, he's always ambiguous. Even when he says born of the seed of David, he uses an ambiguous terminology. Like, does he mean manufactured out of the seed of David, or does he mean literally born to Joseph, who was a descendant of David? Like, if he'd said that, then we would have just one line would have concrete evidence that Paul understood Jesus to be. It was a Lutheran church with another conservative pastor who also disagreed with McDermott. So everybody disagreed with everybody. It was great. Nice. And all got along, so that was fantastic too. And we had people from other denominations coming in. Joel McDermott himself comes from a conservative Presbyterian background, and
you got the atheist groupies to show up?
There's some atheist folks showed up, people of different denominations showed up. It was interesting. So it was a very diverse crowd in that regard. But so it was in a beautiful church, and we just had this debate. It was recorded, so there will be a video up at some point. Nice. But yeah, it was interesting. It was hard to prepare for because I'd never done this side of a debate before. I've usually done, like, the truth question, that's easy. It's very systematic. I can get to it. But this is like, you take like what's better, like you can talk about anything, like you can't really prepare for it. There's like, who knows what he's going to bring up. Yeah. And then how do I respond on time, quickly, in an organized fashion, like immediately, because there's like I can't sit for 5 minutes and work out my outline of what I want to say. And so well, I always worry like I'll miss some points or I'll repeat myself or whatever. And I found it stayed at a very simple level. Like it was all like I did kind of sort of repeat myself a lot, but I was making points that he wasn't really rebutting. And it was all really just it's evidence-based reasoning. And then he would say like, we have no basis for morality, and I go over the like social psychology of human morality, and like so it was that kind of sort of educational exchange. And
sounds like a cool.
It was interesting. I liked the idea, and I liked the opponent. Like he is definitely like wrong about tons of stuff, and he did use a little bit of tactics, but he was mostly very sincere and consistent, right? So he's like, at least he's principled, is what I would say. Like he will not toe the party line of the Republicans. He will. This is what the Bible says, and I think you guys are wrong. Everybody's wrong, and he sticks to it, right? Well, I did another debate in Temecula, California. That was at a church kind of like that, except it was done up like a nightclub, like a trendy nightclub. Nice. And they had the band, they had the whole thing, and the hip preachers trying to be hip and use the vernacular, and
cash bar. No.
Well, so this is the thing. So they had this huge, beautiful bar in the back that looked like out of any high-end dance club or something. Beautiful bar, no alcohol. It's just a bunch of bottles with colored fluids in them.
Fruit drinks.
And then they had fruit drinks and all like the coffee and stuff.
Wow,
but it was
maybe it's BYO flask.
They just
the Bible-shaped flask.
Well, they clearly just wanted the aesthetic, like the look. Like, here's a band.
Like that.
It's dark in here.
We're like
look at the lights. Look at the bar.
I feel like it's a club.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's hip to be here, and I would find that fascinating. Like, especially like Jehovah's Witnesses and even oftentimes the Mormons. Like, if they come knocking on your door and say, well, I'll read your literature if you read mine, and you're like, and they say, nope, sorry, and then they're out of there. Like, that's not hungry hookers. Get it right. Yes. Like that, he would criticize our worldview. Like, you're always changing, and you can change at any time. And it's like, well, so is Christianity, first of all, and secondly,
that's a strength.
That's a strength. Yes.
Right.
But you could tell behind a lot of his argumentation is based on, well, in Christianity we can have absolute certainty. We have, there's definitely going to be ultimate justice. We can have total confidence in that. I'm like, no, you can't, right? It's better to admit that we don't have that assurance. Well, and therefore we've got to deal with the imperfect world we have, really. There's a book by Rodney Stark, he's a terrible historian of antiquity, but he's a really excellent sociologist. And he wrote this book on, I think, the churching of America, something like that, where he actually analyzes like why has America been this hotbed of divisions and sectarianism, and he thinks it's because we have a more free market for religion here than anywhere else, and so it encourages people to explore and
if you have a disagreement within a church,
just split off.
You can stay and work it out, or you can just split off and be in church.
And so that resulted in the explosion of that, and it's still going on like today, even still. First of all, it's a Trojan horse for a lot of bad ideas, and then secondly, like, that's not teaching them the skills they need to be critical thinkers. Like you're saying, like, no, just buy this because it's good for you. It's like, wow,
it feels good even.
If that'll work with religion, what other corporate bullshit or political bullshit can people manipulate you if that's your epistemology?
Right.
I wrote a whole article on this. What's the harm on answering the question? I mean, what's the harm for conservative religion is easy to answer, and I have like a few paragraphs on that. But then I go like, what about liberal religion? And there's still some problems because to continue believing it, you have to adopt this way of knowing that's faulty, and that way of knowing is going to accumulate false beliefs outside religion too. It's not just the religious package you've got, it's just your approach to knowledge in general is going to be defective. And if you fix that, say, I'm going to build an epistemology that protects me as much as possible, is the best epistemology there is, that'll protect me from the most false beliefs, it's going to knock out your religion too. Like you can't, like, there's no magic epistemology that's going to magically know which false beliefs aren't harmful.
Right.
Because if you knew that, you would know they were false.
Right.
And so it's a catch. You know, in terms of book sales, it's now Timothy Keller is the new guy. But in terms of but if you look at the list of like top selling books in Christian apologetics for mass audiences, it's like Timothy Keller, Lee Strobel, I think Josh McDowell, and C.S. Lewis is like fourth or something. There are actually some dominionists who do not think the government should be based on Christian teaching until Jesus comes and rules the government. But anyway, I learned this the other night as I debated a dominionist who teaches exactly that and goes around explaining to people that he's not like those other dominionists.
Oh, right. No true dominionist policy, of course. Hate it when that happens.
You're not a real dominionist.
Yeah.
Only Jesus gets to execute gays. That's the way it works. It's the opposite with atheists. So you go to an activist atheist and you see those shelves full of like Christian books.
Right.
I was like, yeah, I've actually read all these. That's why I have them. Doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Right.
But also you have this problem of like, which one are you going to join? This came up in that debate last night. It's like, which version of religion? Right. I mean, the Nazis had their own version of Christianity.
Of course.
It's like, how do you know that's false? Like, what are you basing it on? Like, how do you pick? And I think as people just want something, and so they'll just glom onto whatever is convenient or whoever's friendliest to them, or
what zip code they were born in,
or that. Yeah, well, especially that. That first of all. But
Which service they found most appealing, you know?
Yeah. No. Yeah, it's absolutely that. I mean, even William Lane Craig says he was basically converted by a pretty girl. So first of all, yes, I actually think this is the best argument for historicity that there is. There's two passages actually that mention brothers of the Lord. 1 Corinthians 9 has a sort of category of people, and then it's unclear what does he mean, like literal brothers of Jesus, or is this just what Christians called themselves when they for the sub-rank people. So in the passage in Galatians, then I point out this, other scholars noted this in the peer-reviewed literature, that the grammar actually says he only met one apostle, not two apostles. I met an apostle unless you count the brother of the Lord, James. The way the grammar is set up, he's saying that this James person was not an apostle. So if we have this situation where if brothers of the Lord is what Christians considered themselves, if that's what their name was for themselves before the word Christian was invented, if they're just the brothers of the Lord, that's the name of this sect. If you're not an apostle, you're just a brother of the Lord. Same way, if you're not the Pope, you're just a Christian. He doesn't even use the standards of journalism. I know.
Let alone scholarship.
And yet boasts of it. It's similar to the guy who does the cold case Christianity. He's like, I'm going to use cold case methods to solve this. And it's like, either you are the shittiest police detective in the universe, or you're full of it right now, because there's no way any of this would pass, and you would know none of it would pass muster. Right. Like you said, the gospel is eyewitness. It's like, can you bring someone on the stand to authenticate that? Because if you can't, it's inadmissible. And Paul says, like, everyone who's baptized in Christ becomes the adopted son of God, and Jesus is the firstborn of many brethren. So we know Paul believes that they are all
which is
brothers.
later in Galatians.
There is. Yes, you're right. I was thinking of Romans, but
Galatians.
There's a
right at the end of Galatians 3, beginning of Galatians 4.
There's a passage in Romans that's even more clear, but you're right. It's repeated in multiple places and also in Galatians. But that's once again, my point is it's ambiguous. You can't tell. Now in my book, when I get the 1 and 3 result, I count the birthing passages as 2-to-1 in favor of historicity, and I count the brothers' passages as 2-to-1 in favor of historicity. And so I actually give a 4-to-1 odds thrown in there in favor of historicity, and I still get 1 and 3 when everything's mapped out in the end. And so that's why my 1 and 3 is based on assuming that that's slight evidence in favor of historicity, but it's not decisive because it isn't clear enough. He could have said like brother in the Lord in the flesh, or he could have said when I met Peter who sat at the feet of Jesus. Like there's
Captain, I don't deny the existence of Abraham Lincoln because
well, when you have
it's in the
all
form
of these
poetry.
ironies, these weird coincidences that occur, where you have, for instance, Jesus tells Peter, you have to take up your cross and follow me, and then suddenly Peter's the one who runs, and it's a different Simon Peter, or a different Simon. So it's Simon Peter, but then there's a different Simon who actually carries the cross. So you have Simon of Cyrene. I mean, when you have that, and you have the men run away, but the women don't, and then you have...
But see, even there, I see you as reaching way out there instead of getting what's close. I mean, because you talk about, okay, Simon of Cyrene, his sons, Rufus and Alexander, who do they represent?
Well, okay,
maybe Alexander the Great and
But see,
Rufus
I don't argue that we
philosopher.
know that one is true. I argue that we can't rule that one out. So that one's 50-50 for me.
I mean,
it could be, there was
those
an
would
actual...
seem much clearer to go to Romans 16 for Rufus, or perhaps going to Acts 11 for the men of Cyrene. Those are much closer kind of context.
Correct, and it could be made up based on that as well, for all we know. But we don't know.
Even the expression of take up your cross and follow me, that was something that the Romans made the crucified do, and it was a way of saying Rome's right, I'm wrong.
Well, they didn't make random strangers.
Well, no.
What do you mean? Like carry a burden, right?
Yeah. No. The irony is that there's 2 Simons in the story, and just conveniently one foreign Simon does the task that Jesus had assigned to Peter.
It makes it not a coincidence then.
Well, no, it's a
Right?
coincidence that they're both Simons, and then
It'd be more ironic if it was the same dude, right?
It'd
It'd be more.
I think
That's not an
I think
irony.
it
If he
was
says
something
you must
here.
bring your cross, you must take
Oh,
up
that
the
would
cross
be
and follow me.
that would be a prophecy.
Right, exactly. No, irony is the exact
Yes,
opposite of that.
yeah.
Where Jesus says, Peter, you must take up the cross and follow me. Simon Peter, be important, that's Simon. And then, but Peter unexpectedly runs away. So, and then there's this other Simon who just happens to be pressed to do it. Like, the coincidence of that is very suspicious. Now, that by itself, if that was the only thing in there, that would be a little bit dubious to say, well, maybe that story was made up and not the rest of it. Or even maybe that was really true. It's, it's an unlikely coincidence, but maybe it happened. But it's when you have all the other things in there. So you have all the ironies as well as all the improbable events, like withering fig trees and killing thousands of pigs and, the sun going out. And you have Jesus walks up to these disciples. Before they're disciples, they're just fishermen. He reads off like 3 lines to them, and immediately they drop their entire living and follow him.
And don't forget the earthquake, the shroud, and the zombies.
Well, that's not in Mark. But anyway, yes.
Okay,
There's no zombies.
Oh, I mean the dead saints that crawl out of
the
their
semantics
graves.
there. But no, like when you add it all, it's when you add it all up that it becomes like this. And then also the literary structure too. So like the multiple 3. There's pairs of 3 in the structure of Mark that's very elaborate, where he's having Jesus move around in this very elaborate architecture of narrative that does not happen in history, but it does happen in fiction and in myth. So it's when you put all of it together that you start to realize that, okay, we can't.
And Starbucks and rest of
Right.
that's
No,
okay.
they seriously, there are books written by Christian anthropologists who use the science of anthropology to advise on how to evangelize, especially
to the unchurched.
especially foreign cultures. But they actually have these like sophisticated evangelism textbooks that are using science to actually figure out like what's the best way to persuade and convert people. It reminds me of this one woman I knew she's a brain scientist. She used to work for corporations, and it's like, what do you like for marketing agencies? She's like, marketing and brain scientists? Yeah, they have tons of us. We're using brain science to figure out how to trick people into buying products. And it's like, and she said it was so unethical I had to leave. Wow. And but the Christians are doing the exact same thing. They see this like as marketing. They're looking at marketing, the actual profession of marketing, the actual science of marketing. They're using it and they're writing textbooks about it. And
Much of
rules
the
of
case.
evidence. Sometimes he says federal rules of evidence. And I'm like, no.
Not at all. Not even admissible.
We haven't even started on traditional authorship, and you're defending eyewitness accounts. Are you out of your mind?
But so here's the thing. I remember the first time I read.
Intellectually honest person. Anyway,
It's ambiguity and tolerance. It's actually it's a thing that people vary in their degree of ambiguity and tolerance. People who are very intolerant of ambiguity feel really physically uncomfortable if there's anything that's like not certain or is too complex or too nuanced. Like that can't be. It's got to be simple. It's got to be certain. I call this in my book, Proving History. I have a section on it. I call it the possibilitor fallacy. So it's like possibly, therefore probably.
Right.
And it's one of the most common fallacies used in Christian
But
apologetics. And this is where I'd like the debate to go, is to actually, let's look at all these particular things and put our own odds on these things and try to justify them. Like, why are you assigning those odds rather than some other? That would be a healthy and useful debate. Like, let's put different numbers to it and see what we get and why. And I think that's what needs to happen for us to move forward on this debate for historicity. But usually what ends up doing is everybody engages in polemics, doesn't read my book, makes arguments against the book that are already refuted in the book because they didn't read it. It's very frustrating. How do you know that? Because it would suck if I was wrong.
Right. So exactly.
Well, actually, the overwhelming majority of scholars regard the Gospels as mostly myth, and that they think there's only some history you can extract, or just the bare fact that Jesus existed. So if you want to talk about the argument from mainstream scholarship, we don't get the Christian worldview out of it. All we get is there was some Jesus, and then these legends and myths got piled on top of him. That's the mainstream whitest consensus view, and that you would be in the minority in that case if we're going to talk about if that's how we should decide where we are. I think the status of Jesus is the same now.
I think that's an assertion that's not true. I think the majority of scholars look at the New Testament documents as historical. I didn't say inerrant.
Right, yeah. No,
but they look at them as historical documents.
Minus the supernatural phenomenon,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So,
but that gets rid
depending on
of
what
resurrection.
kind of worldview
That gets
you
rid of
want
like everything that the worldview is founded on. So,
but you really don't look at them at all as historical.
You look at like the 5 Gospels, when the Jesus Seminar, the Western Institute, like very, very few passages in there, the sayings of Jesus are read. So they actually think a lot of the sayings of Jesus do not go back to Jesus, and that's just the teachings, the things he said, which any ordinary human could have said. Before you even get to the supernatural stuff and the resurrection and the miracles and all of that. So if we're going to talk about like what is the widespread mainstream view of this, it is actually that Jesus was just an ordinary guy, and these myths and legends arose later, and it's just a question of how did those develop, when and which.
But we're talking about the historicity.
Right, now if you're just talking about the bare history of Jesus, that's different, and right?
You would say you're very small number of people
correct,
who hold
right,
the kind of view that you
right
do.
now it's gone up. So there's about 12 fully qualified scholars who agree either with agnosticism about historicity, like it's 50-50, or they think it's at least a respectable possibility that Jesus didn't exist. And that's growing. And I think the reason is similar to Jesus right now. So the first peer-reviewed book to handle this, it's been, in the smokescreen of the bad mythicists that we started this whole conversation with. People have assumed that argument is a dead letter because of all the bad argumentation. And I'm the first one who went in and said, look, let's clear away all the garbage and see if there's anything. Once the smoke clears, is there anything left over? And I'm the only one who's done this and got it through peer review and actually did a proper scholarly work on this. And that came out in 2014, so it's only been 4 years since that came out. Now, if you go look at like Thomas Thompson, when he first came out, was saying, hey, you know what, Moses didn't exist. And in the 70s, we had the exact same thing. It was an extremely small fringe minority agreed that Moses didn't exist. Now it's the most widespread mainstream consensus that Moses either didn't exist or we can't be confident that he did. And so, that took 20 years to finally convert everyone to actually realizing that and to actually look at the literature, not polemicize it, but actually like take seriously his arguments, say, actually he's got a good point. And then to the point now that where the mainstream consensus is flipped and for him. Where are we going to be on Jesus in 20 years? I don't know.